Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome this Friday evening presentation of We the People, presented by the Diamond Factory. Tonight, our guest is Mr. Richard Ramos, as you can see on my, I guess it would be my left here, and we're going to talk about a subject that has been talked about since I was in school. Uh, and that is parenting. But we're going to talk about a different aspect this evening, whereas usually we talk about the youth and their disparities, what they're going through, da da da. Tonight we're going to concentrate on the parents. Good evening, Mr. Ramos. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James. Well, I grew up in Northeast Los Angeles in a single mother home. My father, unfortunately, was alcoholic, and my mother had to make him leave. Domestic violence and different things that went on. Obviously, my mother finally made him leave. So I witnessed that, lived through that, unfortunately. And I think I'm the youngest of five children. And I think that part of the reason that I do what I do is because that never left me of the how a family can be one way from people's view from the outside, but on the inside, things might be happening that people don't realize, and it's really can be destructive. And I'm grateful that my brother and my sisters and we all came out okay out of it. We did get off track for a little while there, but growing up in that area where all the, gangs, drugs, violence, things like that. But my mom was a good mom and she did her best. And, so I'm happy about that. So that's my childhood background. Beyond that, ultimately, I was an athlete. I love sports, and that also helped me to get my life back on track. So that's kind of the backdrop of who I am and where I come from, and some of the things that stuck with me, and just ultimately wanted to try to do something about it.
So you speak of the violence and coming up in a broken home. When can you kind of take us back to that moment when you realized that helping youth meant helping their parents? What shifted for you?
Yeah, the light went on for me on that when I was an at-risk counselor at a junior high school, and I had 50 of the worst kids in the school. My job was to try to help them. They were some of them were in gangs, some of them using drugs, dropping out of school, not going to class, or just causing trouble. But uh, I would try to, encourage them, and I work with them and things like that. But after a while, being a young parent myself, I knew I couldn't just listen to them and believe everything they were telling me about what was going on in their life. So one day I decided, I need to go talk to the parents. And I just invited myself to their house one by one, and that's when the light went on for me, James. And I realized when I saw there was no respect, no control, no communication, all kinds of dysfunction, I said to myself, man, I'm fighting a losing battle. It's two steps forward, three steps back. And, I'd see progress of certain kids. And then after a while, they'd just be right back where they were. And I was like, why is this happening? Well, when I went to their home, that's when I told myself, if I really want to help my students, I need to help mom and dad just as much, maybe more. And that's how I started Parents on a Mission.
Now, maybe it's a generational thing, but usually when you go to a parent and you tell them that your child has a problem or he needs this or she needs that, usually it's the parent that gets rebellious, or I'm doing the best I can.
That's true. Yep.
How do you? I mean, I know you had to run across that.
I did. I ran across a lot of that where, and that's one of the reasons that again, we talk about this in Parents on a Mission because parents are in denial. They don't want to believe that their children are as bad as they are because we're there with them on campus every day or even after school and seeing things that they're doing. But a lot of times, yeah, the parents would come in and they'd accuse us of being racist. Or, I mean, I'm Mexican myself. They're telling me I'm racist. I mean, these are my people. Or you don't like my son. You guys are just against him and my daughter. And, they would really come against us when all we were trying to do was help them with their son or daughter that was out of control. But you're right. But then on the other hand, there were a lot of parents that did respond positively to the help that I was trying to provide. And all I did in the beginning, I just offered some classes and just conversation and just talk about what's going on and what can we do. And of course, that was in the 90s. So that's how long I've been doing this.
Yeah,
So
like I said, I mean, this is not a new problem. I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, we had the same problem. Like and you know, if you went to my parents or my grandparents, it's like, how are you, what the hell are you doing telling me how to raise my child? I mean,
exactly. That's right. Yeah, I definitely have faced that. And the sad part about it is, I realize just like anybody that's serving problems or people, we can't help everybody because everybody doesn't want help. So there's nothing I can do about that. I wish more parents would, you know, be a little bit more honest about the situation because we have our part in it too, for good or bad. But a lot of them, if they don't want help, I just trying to help the ones that want it. And there are a lot of parents that they're very responsive. So I'm grateful for that.
so as you spoke with some of the communities that you worked in, how has this shaped your philosophy around parenting and family?
Well, it's only reinforced it, James, because I believe that the family is the foundation of the community. What I talk about in Parents on a Mission with parents is that the community does not build your family, and you shouldn't be depending on the community to build your family. You are building the community by you building your family, and what you do at home is making the difference of the citizens that we send out into the neighborhood, to the school, ultimately to become work in the community. That's who you're raising. And so if working in these communities with poverty, uh, you know gangs, drugs, all the stuff that we can see that still exists since you and I were kids, is still going on, and it doesn't seem to be getting better in some places. So for me, it just reinforced my belief. What is the answer? If you really think about it, we've tried more laws, more police on the street, more pools, more parks, more prisons, more jails, more probation, all of those things, more programs. Well, if those were the answer, we would have solved these problems a long time ago. But the one thing I kept noticing when I was first doing the youth mentoring and all the community work I was doing in my younger days, they weren't inviting parents to the table. When we talked about community problems, it was the principals of the schools, probation officers, the policemen, counselors, teachers, but they weren't inviting parents to the table. And to me, that's what's missing, and what I've been trying to beat that drum and be that voice. Parents are the key. And that that's what shaped my philosophy of seeing what happens when parents are not being the best version of themselves.
You say that the concept of it takes a village is outdated. Why?
Because I say that it does not take a village to raise a child. What it takes is good parents. And the truth is, the village has changed, and we don't even know who we can trust anymore in the village, from the White House to the church house to the schoolhouse. There's been so many scandals and so much abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever kind of physical abuse. This society, it's scandal after scandal after scandal. And so I always ask parents, well, if you think it takes a village to raise a child, how many of you are willing to turn your children over to the village? Nobody ever raises their hand. So, what we want from the village is we want their support, not their control. And that's what's happening today. Parents are being undermined, our authorities being undermined by the government, by the school, by the university. We can't depend on those institutions, even the church, anymore to support our values, whatever those values might be, but rather the kids are being indoctrinated with all these other things. I could go on and on about that. So that's what I mean, that that's saying, that's an old proverb that was for another time, another culture, another generation. It takes a village. But like I said, that doesn't mean we don't need the quote unquote village. We need their help, but not their control. And to me, that's more and more what we see happening. And so I'm encouraging parents, you are responsible for your kids. You are the final authority, not the doctor, not the coach, not the priest, not the pastor, not the principal, not the counselor. You are the final authority in the life of your children. And you should not be abdicating that role. You need to take up that role and understand how important you and your presence and your love and all of those things are in the life of your children. So that's why I say it's not about the village. It's about what goes on in home. Let the village support us, but not control us.
But see, this is a great contradiction, especially for grandparents like myself. Uh, you know, uh, the idea of my child, well, or as I said, as a grandparent, and you see what's going on not only in the home but in the neighborhood. And once again, we come back to our beliefs, where if you see something, say something. But a lot of times, when, let's just say, the elders try to get involved, it's, you're too old, you come from another time. But I do believe that there are lessons to be learned from that concept of it takes a village.
Yes, I believe that too. And I think where I'm coming from more is this is a different time. And I'm trying to help parents wake up. What is your child being taught at school? See, one of the good things about COVID, to me, there were two positive things that came out of COVID, amongst all the disaster that it really was. But two things happened. One, parents got to stay home with their kids for in a way that they hadn't been doing, and spending time with their kids, because we got shut down, we got locked down, and that helped some parents really reconnect and spend some quality time with their kids. The second good thing that happened was that they started hearing from, because their kids were in school on a tablet or computer, and they started hearing what the teachers were teaching them. And that's when the firestorm got lit up, and parents started storming the boardrooms and saying, hey, I don't want you teaching my kid. I don't want drag queen storybook hour for my kindergarten kids. I don't want my kids to be able to have a sex change or an abortion without my approval. But that's exactly what's happening in schools today. If a child goes to a nurse and says, I have a headache, I need an aspirin, they won't give it to you. You have to have your parents' consent. But if a young child goes to anybody in the school and says, I want a sex change or I want an abortion, They'll do it secretly under the nose of the parents. And recently, Governor Newsom signed a law here in California that if any school official or teacher answers the question of parents about those kinds of issues, if they answer the question, they'll be fired and arrested. That's what I'm talking about. That's not a village that I can trust.
Fair enough. Okay. Uh, so the concept of the village has changed, as well as I think, in instances you point out the purpose of the village. So why do you think that we moved away from the healthy parent-child dynamic, and what can we do to reverse that?
Well, I think a lot of it again just has to do with technology. You know, technology, it can be a blessing or a curse. We are moving so fast. You know, when we grew up, you know, we had three channels. The TV turned off at midnight. They played the Star Spangled Banner. You had three channels. You had one phone on the wall, maybe a radio. But when you were home, you were home. You could play in the neighborhood, but you know, you had more time. Things weren't moving as fast. There was a time to have dinner, shut it down. You know, now it's just ongoing, and kids are not only guilty, parents are just as guilty. They're always on that screen, always in front of their phone, always scrolling, always on social media. Then all the noise, the movies, the magazines, the media, all music, all of it. And so to me, what's happened, it's the technology. Like I said, I use technology and I try to take advantage of it, but it can also take you away from the personal touch, face to face. It's all about Facebook. Parents, I always tell them, don't let Facebook rob you of your face time, eye to eye contact, conversation with your kids. So to me, number one, part of the answer to your question is the world that we're living in, working way more hours before, you know, back in the day when there was no electricity, when it got dark, that was it. You know, but then there's electricity. Oh, now we can work longer. Oh, now there's transportation, trains and cars and airplane. Wow, now we can, you know, all of those things have been good, but they've also, I think, taken away from that quality time at home. What can parents do about it? Take control of your time. Be cognizant of your priorities of your time and plan fun family activities, like playing games together, having dinner together, no music, no TV, no texting, just talking and conversation. That's what parents can do. And if we plan these activities on a consistent basis, we can win back our kids without trying to take them away from their tablets and their phones. And, you know, I don't think that's an answer either. But we need to monitor so that we are the masters of technology and not the slaves of technology.
Um, I'm not sure that we can go back to that point. Um, at my age, I've seen, you know, remarkable advancements. I mean, you know, uh, there used to be an encyclopedia salesman that came by the house. Now this is my encyclopedia. I can pay
Yes.
my bills. I can actually do almost anything that I need with my phone, which is remarkable. Now, you know, you add a tablet to that. I don't even have to read anymore. I have Audible. I have somebody that reads to me.
Yes.
Kids take tests today, and I'm sure, you know, I mean, back in our day, you know, I forget what was that, the books that you would get. They had outlines for every almost every college textbook. I forget what you call it, but I'm sure you remember who I'm talking about. Nowadays, through AI, I can look up. anything that I want within a second. I don't have to do any work. Another thing that I found out with kids is a lot of kids, whereas they know how to use the technology, they don't know how to read. They don't know how to read a book.
Well, worse than that, they don't know how to have a conversation.
Well, the conversation now is on here. Their
Right.
text.
But
There,
but but your
there
question,
is there is no face to face, or hey, like let's all go and play baseball after school. The kids, I mean, they got a whole group of friends, and they all play Call of Duty or uh, whatever it is on the computer, whatever is fashionable nowadays.
right.
People don't have time to get off the computer, whereas before it used to be you had to make time. The most important thing was family time. I remember on Sunday you didn't go after church. You all went home to dinner. You sat around the table. You talked. How many people do that nowadays, Mr. Ramos?
Well, that's what exactly what I'm talking about. Your question was what has moved families apart, the parent-child relationship, and I think it's exactly that. I'm not saying that social media and technology is always bad, but what I am saying is that it has contributed to why families don't go to home after church. There's so many options now, so many more options now for young people and adults. So I just think, part of the answer is parents have to make time. Like you said, we can't say we don't have time. Everybody has time. Everybody has 24 hours a day. You choose your priorities of where you put your time. We are all responsible for what I choose to do with my 24-hour period. And what I'm telling parents is part of that needs to be choices to spend quality time with your kids. It doesn't have to be for hours, it could be for a half hour, it could be for 15 minutes, but it needs to be consistent. Why? Because look at what's happening. The fabric of the home and the relationship between mom and dad is just going farther and farther apart. And so parents take control of it. Your kids are still going to have fun. They're still going to go do see. They're still going to be on the games and the videos. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. I'm just saying parents need to be more aware of it so they can build that human to human, eyeball to eyeball relationship that's being further and further torn apart.
Uh, what do you think young people uh, wish their parents understood, and they usually don't?
Yeah, I that's a hard question, but I would say
Let me go back to my childhood. I wished that my parents understood more about how I depended on them. I played sports, but my father never came to see me play.
oh yeah, that's a big
Uh,
one. Yeah,
you they did not. Um, my father not only was he an iron worker, but he was also a minister. So therefore, when he came home, he did not have time for me, but he had time for God.
right. Yeah, the they call that the minister's mistress. But I was going to say the lack of empathy uh, parents have and not understanding the reality of the peer pressure that's out there and the competition on TikTok and social media. I think young people wish their parents would be a little bit more empathetic about the pressures they're facing, and the competition, and understanding their world, put on their glasses and look through the world through their glasses a little more.
Hmm. Okay. So you talked about the power of the relationship building in families. What does a healthy parent-child relationship actually look like?
Well, for me, it's respectful, fun, wanting to be together, kids who want to hang out with their mom and dad, who are not ashamed of their mom and dad, who have a healthy able to have a healthy conversation. They're not embarrassed to be around their mom and dad when they're around other kids. To me, that's a sign of a healthy home. What's going on behind closed doors? What's going on before they go to bed at night? Maybe there's some stories, maybe there's just some talking, maybe there's some praying, there's a dinner time, there's FaceTime, all of those things. And so it's very natural when you see them together out in public. The kids are not embarrassed of their parents. They're not saying, "Oh, drop me off here, Dad. I don't want to be seen." It's not cool to be seen with you. There's a very healthy respect for one another, and a lot of having looking forward to having fun together instead of, "Oh, I don't want to be around my dad or my mom." That's they're boring. It's not like that. A healthy parent-child relationship, you enjoy having fun together, whatever that might be, going to a ball game, going to the zoo, going to see a movie. I think those are the things that show you have a healthy home relationship with kids when it's demonstrated out in public.
Another kind of archaic, uh, well, my generation had it as archaic, but I think even that has changed. The idea of the parent being the authority figure.
Mm.
There, we also went through a period where part of parenting psychology was being friends with your children. Can is there a proper way that we can combine the two without losing respect on either or both sides?
Well, I think so. That's the difference between being an authoritarian and being authoritative. And some parents are too permissive. So if we can find a healthy balance between, the authoritarian, many of us were raised that way, where, hey, you just be quiet and do what you're told, and that's it. Whether I'm right
Do
or
as
wrong,
I say, not as I do.
that's it. That was kind of the way a lot of us were raised, and we had no voice and no nothing, no talk back, no, or you knew what was good for you if you started to talk back or give your opinion.
Well, I'd
But
be up into the table, and I didn't get there on my own.
yeah, we weren't even allowed to talk at the table. There was no talking. Just eat and be quiet. But authoritarian is you maintain your role as the authority, but you also have a culture of dialogue, a culture of nurturing and kindness and love and understanding, patience, tolerance, all of those things. But you don't give up your role as you're the shot caller. But the shot caller doesn't have to be a dictator and mean and intolerable and harsh, as many of us were raised that way. So there can be a healthy balance between being authoritative and having authoritarian. There is a way to do that, and again, that has a lot to do with the emotional maturity of the parent.
And, is there a more effective way to reward or punish your out of control kids, or is there a third option?
Well, that's where we talk about. I try to help parents understand that punishment is not discipline and discipline is not punishment. Those are two different things. I believe that when kids, if they're getting out of hand, out of control, there needs to be consequences. But punishment is just kind of like it's just a penalty for what you did. and you don't care about outcome. You don't care if they learn a lesson. You just, hey, you did that, you're getting this. That's punishment. Discipline is about teaching. Discipline comes from the Latin word disciplinare, which in Latin means to teach. That's the true purpose of discipline, is that you want to teach a lesson so that they have an outcome of, oh, like, okay, I get it, yeah, I see, I did that, look what happened. Okay, can you learn from that? Can we learn next time why, when I'm telling you to do something, that kind of a conversation. So do I believe that out of control kids need authority and discipline? Yes, absolutely. But punishment is not discipline. Punishment, like I said, that's a different mentality.
So then, what do you think is the biggest mistake that parents make when trying to uh, connect with their teens, or how could they do it better?
I think part of it is just being willing to listen to our kids, um, and be better listeners. Like I said earlier, have a little bit more empathy. That, hey, remember when I was you? You were young, Dad. Remember what you did, what you said, how you acted. You remember the way you were raised. Maybe you didn't like everything that went on in your home. I know I didn't. And the mistake is, if you're not aware of what went on in your family of origin, and some of that is a lot of pain and sometimes abuse, and sometimes, like in my case, domestic violence, you carry that over into your family. Now you're a parent. And if you're not aware of the effect that those things had on you, it's easy to just start the cycle all over again. So I think if parents can be a little bit more reflective, more empathetic, more tolerant, and the skill and the art of listening to their kids, if we did that better, I think that would go a long way.
I want to ask you about cause and effect because being a Vietnam veteran, coming back home was traumatic. And one of the things that was so instilled, at least I believe, was I do not want my children to go through the same types of struggles that I went through. So, therefore, my generation, and probably talking about your father, well, you had a different story, but a lot of veterans did not want their families to have to struggle. Therefore, we did everything that we could in order to make the family feel rewarded. It wasn't about having to earn, it was about giving. It was all about making sure that you didn't have to make that struggle. And in doing that, I think we passed down a sort of sense of irresponsibility. In other words, where my child, well, no, let's start with me. I had to be in the house when the streetlights came on. By the time my kid came along, he had to be in the house at 10 o'clock.
Mm.
When I went to school, my parents asked me, "Where's your homework? Did you do your homework?" They were interested. My son wanted to know what was his son and his friends doing this Friday night. They didn't worry about, you know, uh, or if they did, it was secondary, you know, until the report card came home. What about that time in between? How do parents fill that time in between and make that teenager or that child feel that they're worth their time?
Yeah, I what we really try to encourage, of course, is to start early. This process of building what's called a secure attachment with your son or your daughter, giving them that self worth, self esteem, that they matter, that they count, that they're important, so emotional stability. All of those things start right in the womb and right out of the womb, and just on from there. But of course, if maybe some of those things didn't happen, we run into this. I run into this a lot with families where maybe they weren't, they were young when they got kids, and they, maybe weren't the best parents when the kids were young. Now they're older, 12, 13, 14, 15, and there's not that great relationship. So now what do you do? Well, again, if we have the humility to take the time to just have a conversation, maybe apologize for some things. I know that's what I had to do with my kids. Because I have 5 children, and my 3 older children began to resent the fact that my 2 younger daughters were benefiting from a better dad because I was growing and I was getting better, more tolerant, more patient, more kind. I was a little rough on the edges when I first started at 20, 23 years old. So, but what I'm saying is that parents, um, as we talked about already, we can take assessment. How am I doing with my relationship with me? Because all of my relationships flow out of my relationship with me. So that's one of the first steps. And then, okay, if I'm having maybe some issues with my son or daughter, maybe I'm contributing to that. So if we can talk through that process to get to your question, which is what can parents do, in between that time, again, it's just going to be a consistent expectation that your son has, your daughter has, that your kids have. You know what? It's Monday. We do this on Monday. Or, you know what, my dad on Saturday, we always do this, or whatever it might be. But that's going to be because you are cognizant that something's missing, and you want to be the one to initiate it. But it has to be consistent. And if we do that, we're going to close that gap that you're talking about. And, of course, kids want to know what's going on Friday night. That's okay. But what went on between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you know, those are the times where we have opportunity to say, hey, on Wednesday night, let's do this. Or on Monday night, let's do this. Or on Wednesday and Thursday, let's do this. And if parents, I think, could just think more about that, I think that closes that gap that you're talking about.
Yeah. What are some of the danger signs that a teen might be headed down a dangerous path, or uh, what should parents kind of watch for? What are, as they say today, what are some of the red flags?
Well, some of the common ones are secrecy. If all of a sudden you find your daughter being very secretive or isolating from you or from the family, going to the room, shutting the door, and not coming out, not even wanting to have dinner, with the family, those are definitely red flags. It can be also a change of friends. All of a sudden they're hanging around with a new crowd, and it's like, whoa, like, who are your friends? Who's that guy? Who's that one girl? Maybe they're older. Those are signs. If they start hanging around with older kids or different kids that they used to hang around with, um, dress the way they're dressing, the way their look, now all of a sudden they want to have this look, so that could be a sign. Um, I think those are some of the common ones. Their interests, or maybe they've lost interest in something that you knew. Wow, you were really into, you know, this art or playing the guitar, or you were really into building things, and now you don't want anything to do with it. Why? What happened? And something's going on there. All of a sudden they drop one of their hobbies or one of their interests that they were really into, and now they don't want anything to do with it. It's not cool, that kind of stuff. So I think those are all common signs to look for. And I think a big one a lot of times is the group of people that they start to hang out with.
But Mr. Ramos, these are the same warning signs that they gave my mother. I mean, hasn't
They
you know?
haven't changed.
That's what I mean. But the times have changed. Like you said, we're more into technology now. Uh, it's much easier for me to text um, my grandson than it is for him to say, "Hey, why don't you come out and hang out with Grandpa?"
Yeah. Well, James, some things have changed, some things have not.
Some
You know,
things stay the same.
some things stay the same, man. And you know, of course, I already talked about social media is a big sign. If, like I said, if in America the average time that a youth spends on their screen is 4.8 hours a day, the adult average is 2.1 every day. So between them, that's over 6 hours of just being in front of either your phone or a tablet or a computer. So on social media, that's just an average. So you know, that may have replaced something that before maybe it was the telephone when we were growing up. How long were you on the phone? Of course, there was only one phone. Or you call somebody and you got bzz, 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 the kids wouldn't even know what that is. Or remember, how about when you used to call the operator,
Look,
say, I need to break
you
into my
remember party lines when you had
line.
to?
Yeah, now it's got Zoom. They can have a party on Zoom.
But
But
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Now I would also like to think that economics has played a part in this.
yes,
Before, I mean, your dad went to work, mom stayed home, took care of the kids. His paycheck took care of the car payment, the house note, bought the groceries, all of that. Nowadays, both parents usually have to have a job. I don't even, I mean, things have changed so much to I don't even know where we rank owning homes, whereas our generations felt much different about that. Nowadays, you see so many condominiums and things like that growing up. Home ownership, I think, is also on a decline, which may contribute because a child doesn't come home to his home and parents. He comes home more or less to a community. So, how do you think those two things figure out, especially on the economic side? As far as, I mean, another thing that kids used to have, I mean, they could get a job after school. They could deliver papers, so forth and so on. McDonald's is now talking about going robotic. The way we make cars now. You don't
right.
need as many people on the assembly line. So, what do you think? How economics and labor has also helped to divide and keep a family from developing as they did back in, say, the 90s.
Yeah, there's no question that the economics, the inflation, home ownership is definitely down amongst Latinos and Black families, and earning as well. Some people have more than one job just to keep up, depending on where you live, of course. But I believe it definitely, the economics have definitely the pressure that's on parents to earn, to provide. Things are way more expensive. I mean, remember when I was in high school, you didn't have to pay to play sports. Everything was provided for us. That went out the window a long time ago. It's
Yeah,
very
but again, though, see, I didn't expect my parents to buy me a car for graduation either.
no, that's right. Me either. Me either. No, no way, no way. My mom couldn't. When I was, when I remember when I would go to the grocery store with my mom, she didn't pay with money. She paid with one of those books that you pull coupons out of.
Yep.
Uh, you know, so
When they
definitely
were really food stamps.
food stamps, all of that. Yeah, that's right. That's what it was. And so nowadays, I still think there's a lot of families that are the pressure of keeping up with the bills and the price of this and that and everything, whether it's electricity, gas, uh, school, sports. Um, it's definitely, I think, definitely puts a lot of pressure. And then some parents, and one of my sons is a high school football coach. Sometimes kids they can't play because the parents either need them to work or they just don't have the money. They can't afford it. So that's to me is definitely a factor as well.
And let's talk about some of the programs that kids are missing these days, among which some of them are sports, for instance, which also helps give you a sense of camaraderie and a sense of community. Uh, we can, uh, we had certain clubs, civics clubs. We had debate teams. There are so many things that we have cut down. I think in order for us to make time to advance technology, that we are leaving the concept of family and community behind.
I think so. Again, there just needs to be a happy balance so that we are mastering the technology and it's not controlling and dividing us and all those things. We can do better. I think we can be in control of what's priority in our life and things like that. But I'm not. I use technology every day too. We're using it right now, so it has its place for sure.
So, getting back to the art of parenting within the age of technology, uh, how do we appeal to our children, uh, as you say, and be able to establish those particular boundaries? I think boundaries are the hardest thing for us to set uh, due to, a, well, I want to say a conflict in scheduling, but as you say, we all have the same 24-hour day.
Yeah, the hard part is if you're not setting boundaries early in the life of our children that are reasonable, common sense, just reasonable when kids are little. If you don't, it's easier if you do it then, start then. And then as they get older, you give them more time, more freedom, more freedom. You give them opportunities to earn your trust because they're older, and that's the better way to do it. But if you have not been doing that, and all of a sudden now you want to start laying down the law on boundaries, now that well, I went to Parents on a Mission, and I heard Richard Ramos say, that we need to, that's not the right approach because you've already allowed them to have that freedom, and you know how it is when you're trying to take away freedom from anybody. Once once the horse is out of the barn, that's pretty much almost impossible to bring it back in. But that doesn't mean it can't be done, but it just has to be done with wisdom and patience and timing and tolerance. Because the only thing, James, in my view, it's all about relationship. It's really working hard. My kids, always on the tab and always on the phone and doesn't want to hang around with me. And I realized, we don't have a great connection anymore. Well, if you want it, you're going to have to work for it. And hopefully parents will want it because they see what's happening with their son or their daughter is not healthy. They're being influenced by social media influencers. They're more loyal to their friends, more loyal to the gang, to the drugs, to the pornography, more loyal to the social media influencers than they are to mom and dad, family values, grandpa, grandma, siblings. That's what can happen. But what I'm saying, it can be roped in. You could rope it in if that's happening. But a lot of times, the reason that happens is because we haven't been doing the work from the time they were little. And now all of a sudden we want to put a boundary. Well, that's going to have to be done with a lot of wisdom and a lot of patience. Um, and in some cases, a lot of tears.
A lot of tears. Speaking of which, one of my experiences when coming back to the real world uh, was that I held a lot of anger, and I took a lot of that anger out in very unhelpful ways. But in seeking help, one of my questions, especially to some of the guys that came back from Afghanistan and Iraq, is that, what did you feel anger about? What caused your anger when the guys that came before you had to go through this, and this, once again, basically forcing my experiences upon someone else. But my question to you is, what do you find to be the biggest, the root cause of anger in our youth today? The anger and the violence, especially in young men. I used to, kind of contributed to uh, video games, because, to me, games like Call of Duty, like when the game is over, like everything starts over. It's not like that in real life. When you pull that trigger, you can't unpull it.
That's right.
And you find a lot of young men, and I know as a soldier, like I took great pride in my proficiency. Nowadays, it seems like not only what we had just what 2 days ago, 3 days ago, uh, a
Mm-hmm.
youth that decided that he would settle his anger with violence. So how do I mean, are there some, other than the signs that you've already spoken about? I mean, you know, how do you distinguish that young man from other young men that might have anger issues, but not to that extent? What is the cause of so much anger in our youth? What do you contribute to?
Well, here's another thing that hasn't really changed, and I've seen this for many years. I was asked this question at a youth conference to speak on this very topic. What is the cause of youth violence? And my answer is still the same, although we can nuance it a little bit. But in my opinion, acts of violence are the result of an angry heart, and an angry heart is the result of unresolved injustices that usually took place in the home. So that's a very broad statement. When I've studied the lives of these mass shooters, I don't really study them anymore because it's always the same thing. I used to, years after somebody does a shooting like that, years later, somebody will write a book or somebody will do research or there'll be some kind of paper studying, what happened, what kind of home, all of those kinds of things. And it's always the same pattern. A woman by the name of Catherine Seifert, she interviewed all the worst criminals that you and I, Manson and all these people, uh, I forget all their names, right? Dahmer and all those guys and others. She interviewed them, came up with the same answer. So it always comes down to abuse, neglect, and abandonment. That and abuse meaning either physical, sexual, verbal, or all three, or two of the three, some kind of abandonment, some kind of neglect. That is the root of this angry heart. And usually it's, young boys or men. That's some kind of injustice that was never resolved. And then we see, maybe then it's happening at work. So now they're angry and they got burned at work or lied to at work, or maybe they got ousted of a social group and now they're angry at that group. Maybe they were made fun of or ridiculed, some kind of issue like that. But to me, what that's triggering is something that was already there that goes way back to their childhood. And now I'm not saying this in 100% of cases, because many people who were abused, whether it's sexually, physically, but they didn't turn out to be criminals. Many of them turned their life around. So not everybody that suffers those things goes down that road. So let's be clear about that. But I just got to say, most of the time when like I said, when I've researched these people, to answer your question, there's some kind of neglect, abuse, abandonment, unresolved injustice. Maybe it didn't take place in the home. Maybe it was a priest. Maybe it was a pastor. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a relative. Somewhere, somehow, and it doesn't always have to be sexual. It could be some other, something else. To me, that's the root of it. That's my answer.
So, do you think that today's parents really understand how it feels to grow up in today's culture, and what are the parents missing here?
Well, I think some do, and some don't if they're not paying attention. I think this is why I talk about my book, Parents on a Mission, how parents can win the competition for the heart, mind, and loyalty of their children. That's what's at stake. The loyalty. How do you get the loyalty of kids? You got to win their heart. You got to win their mind. And so I think parents, um, they need to understand that. What I say to them is, you are in a daily battle, mom and dad, a daily battle, a daily war, a daily competition for the loyalty of your daughter, the loyalty of your son. We used to pledge allegiance, to the flag. That's what's happening today. People are pledging their allegiance to all these other things, and not all of it is good. So I think parents really need to pay attention. Now, how many of them, I don't know. I mean, you're asking me what's missing, what can they do? Um, do they understand today's culture? I think the ones that are paying attention do, but I think a lot of my experience has been a lot of parents are not paying attention. They're caught up in their own, and to be fair, they're caught up in their pressure of working and trying to earn, trying to make a living, or they're just caught up in their own thing, whatever that might be. But what's getting left behind is the pledge of allegiance from their kids to the family, to their parents, to the culture that
Can
we're
I
living.
pledge allegiance to somebody that's not there?
Well, there you go. That's what I'm. That's what I mean. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So your question of, what do parents understand? Some do, some don't. And my mission is to wake them up and to do my best to, in a loving way, not in a condemning way, not in a blaming way, but in a loving way, to challenge them to wake up. Look at what's going on around you. Pay attention. Be cognizant. You know, all of the things that we talked about tonight. And I really appreciate you, James, taking the time, allowing me to express and explain. You know, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm not saying I'm right in everything, but I just appreciate you allowing me to elaborate on some of the things that I believe. And I got to say that, I've been doing this a long time and we've had some very good results.
Well, I'm going to get to some of those results, but I want to ask you: do you think that parents should be held accountable for their children's uh, behavior, and in the sense of when they break the law or engage in harmful behavior?
Well, I think, yeah, that it depends. It depends on the nature of the law they broke or the crime. It depends on the track record. A first time kid is not the same as some kid whose parents are just neglectful and he's out there committing crimes all the time and getting caught and released and caught and released. I think it's a case by case basis. I think in some cases, yes, parents should be held accountable. But maybe in other cases, they're going to get a warning and say, hey, if you keep going, your son goes down this road, you're going to be ending up, being accountable for it. So I just think there's got to be some nuance there and some room for discretion, those kinds of things. But in general, um, if somebody's kid is just a menace to society, then yeah, there should be some form of accountability. And what that is, of course, it's really, I don't think you could have a standard for every situation, but there's got to be a way to find some kind of fair accountability.
Now, your program has been adopted in places like Colorado, even Guatemala. What do you think makes it resonate across different cultures?
I think it's just the principles that we share are universal. The universal principles, common sense, honesty, integrity, proper use of authority, proper use of discipline, parent personal growth and emotional maturity. I mean, those are things that they cut across all cultures, all ethnicities, all social status, economic status. You don't have to be rich to be honest, and you don't have to be poor to be honest. You don't have to be wealthy to have integrity. You don't have to be poor to have integrity. To use as a parent, properly use authority and discipline has nothing to do with your social economic status. So these are just general, universal principles that we're teaching that apply to anybody, anywhere in the world. Be respectful to your parents. I mean, James, we're not teaching any revelations. This is
No,
stuff that
this is basic stuff that it seems like
is,
we've left behind in our culture, and
there you go. We've gotten away from it, and I'm bringing it back. I'm trying to bring it back as much as I can, but within the context that we're living in now in the 21st century in a digitized era. I understand that. That's the world we live in now. So that's the context. But like we said, some of those universal principles like respect and forgiveness and love and kindness and integrity and those things don't change. At least they shouldn't change, in my opinion.
so I know I've kept you on a little longer than you probably intended, but just a couple more things here. If you could give one message to every parent that's listening right now, what would it be?
Well, it would be what I already said. You got to understand, mom and dad, especially if your children are little, that you are in a competition. That maybe that's the best way to look at it. Your son and daughter is being competed for by
You
social
see, I think you mentioned that parenting was a profession.
parenting. That's a teaching I give. What I mean by profession is this: whenever you go to a professional, doctor, lawyer, mechanic, whatever, you know that that person has studied, has gone to conferences, has read, because they want to be relevant. They want to stay. They don't go to conferences because they're bad lawyers or bad doctors or bad teachers. They go there because they realize that when they graduated, their education began in the real world. And so they want to stay relevant. They want to be up to date. Why should our kids expect anything different from us? But a lot of times with parent, we're not growing. We stop growing. We're not learning. We're not reading. We're not buying online courses. We're not improving our emotional maturity. And so what happens is we have a 40-year-old with a 15-year-old mentality, and now he has kids that are 15. So you have a 15-year-old mind dealing with a 15-year-old kid, and that doesn't work. So what I mean by being a professional is that we are always improving, always growing, staying up to date, trying to stay ahead of the what do they call it, ahead of the curve. But a lot of parents don't do that. They're out of date, they're irrelevant, they don't know what's going on. Professionals don't do that. Professionals, good professionals anyway, you want to go to a good doctor. You don't want to go for a doctor that doesn't he's not up to date. And a lot of parents are not up to date. So that's what I mean by being a professional as a parent.
So, what's next for Parents on a Mission, and how can people get involved or learn more about uh, Parents
Yeah,
on a Mission?
yeah. Thanks for asking that, James. People can find resources that I've developed on my website or get involved with if they want to join me as a parent on a mission mentor and be trained and be certified. They can learn about that on my website, richardrramos.com. Don't forget the middle initial. It's not richardramus.com, it's richardrramos.com. I also started a podcast just recently. I've only done 25 episodes. It's called the Parent Whisperer Podcast.com. Parent Whisperer Podcast.com. They can go there and listen. I've been speaking to all kinds of topics that you're asking me about and just trying my best to give some guidance there. I also have a new online course that I'm going to be releasing where normally the Parents on a Mission classes are done, in some nonprofit or a school or a church or in prison, jails. But I realize it's not everywhere. So now it's going to be online and I'll be marketing that and people can watch it at their leisure, watch the videos whenever they want to, take their time with it and just learn the things that we've been teaching in Parents on a Mission. And I recently released a new book just last month called The
This
Art.
is your second book?
Well, this is my fifth book, but this is my
Okay.
second book recently. Um, the book I released in 2023 was Parents on a Mission, and this is on my website. How parents can win the competition for the heart, mind, and loyalty of their children. I followed that with a book on step parenting because step parents are like the norm. Blended families are the norm. And I've been a step parent all my parenting life, and I have a current blended family. So I wrote The Art of Step Parenting, How to Blend Families Without Tearing Them Apart. And in that book, I tell my story and the story of a lot of other people. And I just wanted to add my voice because step families and blended families and second marriages and third marriages and divorce are, as you know, almost the norm in America now. And I just wanted to add my voice to that as a part of what Parents on a Mission is about. So that those books are on my website and people can go there and find them, or they can find them on Amazon.
Now, are you on Audible or Kindle or?
I'm on Kindle. Yep.
Well, it was very interesting talking with you this evening. As I said, I've learned some things that hopefully will help me with dealing some of the mentality of the younger men in the community, and as well as some of hopefully understanding, the future generations, my grandkids, my great
Yes.
grandkids,
Yes.
being able to pass down, some of the knowledge as an elder, being able to, uh, you know, uh, not to judge so quickly, which I think is another fault that we have as adults, uh, because sometimes it's as important to me to learn not what to do as it is what to do.
That's right.
So I'm going to give you our final word tonight, Mr. Ramos, and I hope we can have you back again as we talk more about parenting and education. I'd like to get some of your ideas on what's happening with the Department of Education, since you brought up some examples there. And maybe we can also discuss that at a later date.
Well, James, it's my pleasure. I thank you for having me. I'd be happy to come back whenever it works out for you. Just let me know, and I hope that your audience was able to glean some positive guidance here tonight.
And I'll send you the link so you can also put it on your website or share it with your audience. I thank you so much for your time this Friday evening, and uh, well, I'm sure you wanted to break from moving anyway. So, you know,
Yes,
I just
that's
I was
true.
an enabler tonight. So,
Yes, you were. Thank you.
you have a good evening, sir. Look forward to
Okay,
talking with you again.
you too. Thank you.
That was Mr. Robert Ramos, uh, our expert on parenting. Be sure to look up Parents on the Move, and we look forward to having him back on the show once again. Have a good night, a good Friday, everyone. See you next week.